All right, thank you all for coming this afternoon. So Archives and History has hired a new digital archivist. Kevin Dusenberry has been with us for just over a year now as our newest staff person, and he is a great innovator and thinker. And so when he joined our team, I asked him if it was possible to create some sort of easier way for persons to record their stories, their testimonies, their calls to ministry, their witnessing of mission that was accessible and, relatively, not cheap's not the right word, but relatively accessible. I'll just say it that way. And he said, of course. And then he proceeded to write all of the code for this app. So we now have a new app called the United Methodist Stories app, where you can log on, fill out the information, record your oral history, and when you hit submit, a copy is emailed to you and another copy goes directly to the digital vault at the General Commission on Archives and History. So we've piloted this at a few events now. The first was at Reconciling Ministries Network in October at their 40th convocation. And now we have invited persons like Molly next to me to do this on their own. So at RMN, I was there pushing record, making sure everything worked. And Molly is one of our first persons to log in without me there and to use the app as it's intended. So I look forward to hearing from her how it's going. Hopefully it's working.
Yes, it's been easy to use the app. I was grateful at the Reconciling Ministries convocation in October to be able to record some stories from general conferences past with your help, and have found it easy to use the app during this general conference to record stories as we're going along, and have found it satisfying to help capture some of the story of what's happening at general conference that doesn't make it into the plenary minutes or the official actions. But it's been such a privilege to be a part of movements that are happening around the edges of and in preparation for the general conference, to capture that piece of the movement of the people who are the United Methodist Church.
Mm-hmm. And one of the ways that I see this app working, and I think Molly just spoke to it a bit, is when we look at our historic record, General Conference and the politics around General Conference and the planning and the strategy, a lot of that was written down through correspondence. We don't really write letters so much anymore. And so this is a way for us to capture some of the strategy that does go on, to provide something that is readily available to people who are parts of different groups working towards different movements, or kind of just to record their experiences of things that happen at General Conference. This will also it could be used in a variety of ways. So we will open it up. It will be customizable. So at your annual conference, if you want to ask your laypersons, your clergy, your seminarians, anyone in attendance a certain question to reflect on that week, we could design the app to have that question, and so that your annual conference is able to capture people's experiences around a certain event or a certain question. We will also be using this to help collect and preserve the stories of persons both in their native tongues and persons whose maybe their cultural context or their ministry context isn't prone to predominantly a written narrative. So this will be open to doing and capturing oral histories, so that we aren't just relying so heavily upon a written dominant narrative, which tends to be a Western white narrative.
I've enjoyed being able to record and capture some of the work that's happened to build communication and coalitions across the U.S. in particular in preparation for this general conference. Yesterday I recorded what do we call it? An entry into the record after I came out of a meeting where I was gathered with other folks at the First Church in Charlotte. Captured a little bit about what we were talking about and the work that we've been doing, and tried to capture a little bit about also the the conversation that we're having, the sort of theological ideas that are moving us forward, which sometimes do or don't end up in the debate on the floor. So I guess I've also found it personally satisfying to have an occasion for that kind of reflection about like how would I tell this story if I were, wanting to narrate it and save it for my grandkids to read when they're wondering what happened at this general conference in 2024.
Yeah. And one thing that I'll add, and this is when we open it up to customization, this is a part that can or cannot be included in that customization, but the oral histories that the General Commission on Archives and History collects, so the questions that we put out there, all of our testimonies that we receive will automatically be under a 25-year kind of protection, so that if names are mentioned, those persons are protected, and the people giving the testimonies are also protected. And that allows for transparency and people to be candid about what's going on. So it allows for different levels of protection. There is a way to waive that if people giving their oral history choose to do so, but we encourage keeping it because that way, you can tell us how you really feel.
Video interviews or things that have been done in the past, but they would like to have those archived. Is that something that they can submit as well?
Yes, and we already have a procedure in place for that. So we are actively archiving digital videos, digital narratives, and things like this. We tend to do those through Dropbox links, which are relatively secure and allow us to upload those types of resources directly to our digital vault as well. We are also, and we may talk about this in a press release later this week, I'm not really sure. We're finding ways to help annual conference archives set up their digital vaults as well and create kind of a larger United Methodist Church database for digital records. And that's our virtual circuit writer project is what we're calling that. It's also implemented and designed by our digital archivist, Kevin Dusenberry, as well.
When's the app going to be for everybody? When's it going to be?
So we are launching it this week and making it available. So it will be available to download, I believe, in the app stores once we get back from General Conference and make sure that everything worked as it was. I've been in communication with Kevin. He knows that stories are being recorded because he can see it. He's getting notifications. So we do know that it is working. We just wanted, before we put it on the App Store and people start downloading it, we wanted to really make sure that everything was seamless.
Anybody else have any questions? I have a mic now. Oh, sorry.
No, you're fine.
So it is designed and intended for this to be, like I said, a 25-year pause. So like as communicators, we won't be immediately sharing these stories that are shared at all. It'll be for archival purposes.
Well, that's the beauty of it, right? You could, so at an annual conference, right, if you wanted to kind of use it to get people's reactions to things, you would just need to be open that the 25-year closure isn't applied. And you could still use it to collect stories or to hear from a variety of people through the click of a button. You would just need to make it known that it does not apply. But for archival purposes, when we're talking about oral histories, the 25-year closure is pretty standard.
What kind of screening? What kind of screening of the entries are you going to have? Obviously, some people might do something inappropriate or along those lines.
So when it comes to the General Commission on Archives and History, we are going to rely predominantly on our designing certain questions and opening up the event and organizing it in a certain way to where it's invite predominantly. And we would encourage annual conferences to do that as well. And when it comes to screening, so when you log in and you kind of go through the motions, you need to kind of categorize your answers and your stories and things in a certain way. And so it will allow us to do some of that work. We were also, Kevin is great with AI and using AI to kind of both transcribe oral histories for us. And in that transcription, we can kind of, well, I say he can code it to where, we can tag certain words. And if a certain word is used, we can kind of do a screening on the back end. Yeah.
So two quick questions. The first one is like, what is the limit as far as each entry? When you let people just kind of talk, sometimes that can go on for a while. So is there a limit that you've placed in it? So we'll go with that one first.
So we don't have a point to where it will stop recording. We have, and Molly might be able to speak to this. I know at Convocation in October, I think we had a 20-minute or a 30-minute countdown clock. And so people were aware as to how long they were speaking. However, when it reached 0, it did not stop recording. It was just kind of alerting people that we need you to wrap it up.
The one I'm using during this general conference has a 60-minute countdown clock for each entry. And then after I finish recording, I hit the button to stop recording, and then it lets me review it before I hit the submit button.
Yeah. So we encourage people to keep them between 15 to 20 minutes, especially when answering specific questions, because most people will listen to smaller clips, especially of things like this. But for kind of history's sake, right, the 30 to 60 minutes is a good oral history, a good size.
And as far as the customizable part of it, how does that process work? The reason I ask is the Great Plains celebrates 10 years this year.
Ooh.
This would be a good way to kick it off while we're at our annual conference. But I'm not sure, like, trying to get my head around how we might use it. And so how would that process work?
You would reach out to the General Commission on Archives and History. We can provide you with that information. And you would either email me or you can email Kevin Dusenberry directly. His email is kdusenberry, that's DUSENBERRY, @GCAH.org. And we'll be able to kind of play with the customization alongside you, right? So we haven't customized it for different events yet, so there might be some ironing out, but we would gladly walk alongside Great Plains with that and with you all and figure out, what are the best questions to ask, what are the time limits, where should the emails go, or where should the recordings go, and all of that.
And if you get back and you forget what that email address is, you can send something to the press center and we're happy to pass it along.
You mentioned accessibility of use for recording and things like that. It sounds like there's also some tagging in the submission. So do you envision that as these submissions kind of open up, 25 years from now, that it's an easier way to search and find things as well, that you're building kind of that infrastructure for accessibility of use as well? Yes.
And that's one of the goals, right, is to provide kind of a personal touch to the often done, right? So at General Conference, that's a great example because so much of the information we rely upon is written and comes from the press room or is recorded from the floor. And so this adds some nuance to that and some kind of real-time reactions to what's going on. And through using AI and using AI to transcribe these, then yes, we can tag certain things so that people in 25 years, if they're researching what happened at this 2020 General Conference, they'll be able to search for either the 3 R's or regionalization. And if any of these oral histories that we're gathering here mention those, they'll pop up.
Anyone else have a question?
Is this technology new enough that you could actually license it to other folks to do the same thing?
So it is original code that Kevin has written. Word has gotten out to a couple of my colleagues at other denominations that we are doing this. And we do have discussions with their equivalent of a General Secretary of Archives scheduled for May to see if that is a possibility.
Alrighty, well, thank you so much for sharing, and we'll be sure to send a link out and news out, and Crystal's got that news release going, and we'll make sure we get that shared for everyone.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.